Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the Maximo Application Suite Lunch and Learns. This month, we decided to tackle the subject of Application Suite licensing. So we're going to go over a little bit of terminology you need to know, how the Application Suite points work. We don't actually sell licenses with the application points here at NACE just because it's so confusing. We do it by license type, but for those of you who aren't with NACE, it's good to know kind of how that works. And then how do we do license audits? So you guys have a better idea of what happens on the back end for the license audits. So as always, feel free to ask any questions. You can raise your hand. You can also go to the chat and ask any questions via the chat, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Jalen will see and let me know what's going on, and any of us can answer any questions that you have. So we're going to start off with the biggest question we get from everybody. How do you define a user, right? Every user has to have a unique email address associated with that user. So you can have a user associated with, it has to be a one-to-one, a user and a person have to be associated, but you could have potentially multiple users for one live human being, right? I could set up 4 accounts with 4 different email addresses that I use to log into Maximo. Each one of those accounts would be considered a user as far as licensing goes. Even though all 4 of those are assigned to me as a human being, they are still 4 unique user accounts, and each one would need to be licensed accordingly. The other thing is you cannot assign a user vendor or something, but you cannot assign a user account or a login account to a group. It has to be assigned to a specific individual. Now, that being said, we are going to talk a little bit about how you do concurrent licensing, and you can take one license and associate it to a group of individuals, but the user account, the unique user account that needs to have a license, has to be assigned to a specific individual. If it is assigned to a group, when IBM audits those, we will be dinged for that. They charge extra for those, and then they require you to fix those. So as a corporation with NACE, when we do your accounts, we review those accounts to make sure they're assigned in the way that IBM allows, so we don't get fined for that later on. The next thing to keep in mind is, even though you have a user account, if that user has never logged into Maximo before, they just have a user account set up, it doesn't matter. They are still considered a username. They still are required to have a user license to be able to access anything in Maximo. So a user is a user when they're entered, whether or not they've ever actually utilized that account to log into Maximo, they're still considered a user. And in order to do anything in Maximo, you must have a user account. So there's user accounts that are free. There are user accounts that are paid. To do anything at all in Maximo, you need to have a user account, and then your ability to get to the different applications depends on how that user account's set up. And then we touched on this a little bit before. If a single individual or a single human being has created multiple user accounts for themselves, each user account is qualified as a user and will need to be licensed accordingly. So having looked at that, we'll go to the next thing you need to understand, which is user types. So there are 2 types of users in Maximo. The first is what they call authorized. We used to call this named. We kind of use it interchangeably. Named is a little more understandable, I guess, than authorized, the way that IBM identifies it. But a authorized or named user is assigned their own license. They can log into Maximo Manage at any time, and those points or seats are reserved for that user even when they're not logged in. So as a named or authorized user, you're constantly consuming application points. And so whenever you want to log in, you just log in, you do what you need to do, you log out. Regardless of whether you're logged in or logged out, those points are taken. You can also log into multiple I guess you could log into multiple instances of Maximo. So you could have one window open in work orders and a second window open in purchasing, and on your phone or your mobile tablet, you could have another window open. As long as you're using the same username, it is associated with your user. So as a named user, you'd be able to log into all of those. As a concurrent user, once you log into one, your login could go to as many instances of Maximo as you want. So the authorized and concurrent don't have to do with how many windows you have open. They have to do with you being able to log into Maximo. So we'll talk about concurrent users. So a concurrent user is someone who shares a license with multiple people. So concurrent user can only log in to manage when there are open seats or when they're available at points. When a user logs in, the seats are reserved until that user logs out, and then those seats are returned back to the pool. Or that, basically, we'll talk a little bit about a funnel here in a second about how that happens. Currently, for our environments, the timeout is 4 hours. You can change that if you want to. For individual sites, you would need to kind of coordinate with us on that. But there is no limit to the number of people who can share a concurrent license. So you could have 100 people and one concurrent license, but only one person could be logged in at a time with that license. So if you had one license and 100 people were sharing that, whenever one person was logged in, the other 99 would get denials when they try to log in. It would say they don't have the access to log in, essentially, or there's not any available points for them to log in. So I kind of tried to draw a little bit of a diagram to kind of help this. So if you consider Maximo as kind of this funnel, if you're authorized, you sit in that funnel, and whenever you want to go in, you can go through the funnel. Whenever you want to leave, you can open up that funnel back again. It's constantly open. As a concurrent user, you can have a bunch of people in here. And if Max wants to sign into that funnel, he plugs it up for anybody else. So he's plugged in, closes up that funnel for everybody else until he's done, and then he'll back out and it's available for someone else to go in. And any of these three people could be logged in, but they cannot all be logged in at the same time. So if you kind of look at it as a funnel, one person's plugged it up. Everyone else who's sharing that concurrent license, they're not going to be able to get in. Now, often what happens is we'll have a pool of 20 people, let's say, and we have 3 concurrent licenses. So all 20 of those people are trying to funnel into one of those funnels. And once all 3 license funnels are blocked, nobody else can log in that concurrent group. Because authorized, they're always open and available for that one single individual, but a concurrent, once someone's logged in, it's blocked. So I hope that kind of helps explain a little bit with that diagram what we're looking at for concurrent versus the named or authorized user.
Hey Megan, this is Jalen.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but looks like John Book has a question.
Yes.
Hey Megan,
John,
I'm sorry I got in a little late, but
Hey, no worries.
you used the term manage when
Yes.
in the previous slide. I don't know if you covered that already, but I'm just wondering
I didn't.
what that capitalized term means.
So Maximo used to be its own application, and it was just Maximo Application. When they came out with the new suite, it's called Maximo Application Suite. And so the suite has a bunch of different applications. And what we used to know as Maximo, it's now been renamed as the manage portion of that suite. So all of the functionality that we would use in Maximo, it got lodged into that manage. As a suite now, we have additional applications available that you can use. So we can use manage, which is what we're used to, managing your assets. They have one called monitor, which allows you to take information about those assets, take them into the monitor application, make decisions and conduct actions through manage. So you could create work orders, issue out PMs based off of meters or whatever. That's one piece. They have a health module that will take information from manage and allow you to determine what the health of your assets is and what you should do. There's a predict that will allow you to take your manage information and predict what will happen if you manage it a certain way or if you make certain actions to your assets. And then they have some other ones that are available that we won't really talk about, but those four are kind of the main ones that we'll see. So because they took Maximo and they made it this whole suite of applications now, what we used to call Maximo is now called Manage. So that's the Maximo application.
Interesting. Okay.
Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, new to me. Yeah,
Yes,
thanks.
yeah. There's a bunch of others. They have like visual inspection, so you can take pictures and create work orders off of that. That's another part of the suite. They're kind of building as they go, increasing what's available. There's an AI module that they're working on. So a lot of stuff coming in the future, but they've changed it a little bit. So it's what we call Manage now.
So, are we not going to use Maximo in the future as far
No,
as
we can still
the
use
naming?
Maximo. Yeah, because the Maximo Application Suite is all of those in Maximo. We're just talking about accessing
The manage
right
portion.
now. Yeah.
Okay, the manage module is what
Yes.
basically it is. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. IBM likes to keep us on our toes. Okay, so let's take a look at the next piece that we're going to talk about, and that's an application group. And I know we talk about this a lot, an application group or a functional group. In IBM, it's considered an applicational group. And you'll notice when you log into Maximo, whoops, and you pop up that menu on the left side, you'll notice there are a bunch of subcategories basically here. So there's work orders, task management, system configuration, all these options in here. And if we go into, let's say, work orders, there's all these applications in work orders. We can do work order tracking, project management, service requests. So each of these main categories here is what would be considered an application group. And you have access, when you have access to an application group, you can have access to everything underneath that group heading as an edit access. So if I give someone access to, let's say, purchasing, and I give them access to create a purchase requisition, technically, as far as licensing goes, anything else in purchasing, I could give them and just consume, or basically that would be one application group that they would be using. So we'll talk a little bit in the next slide about how these application groups work into the licensing, but each of these categories you're going to see here are application groups. The one that I know will be frustrating to you, and it's frustrating to us as well, is the planning module versus preventive maintenance module. Planning module has job plans and it has routes. The preventive maintenance module has preventive maintenance records. So if you want an employee to be able to create and manage PMs, they will need access to two application groups for that. The planning application group for the job plans and the routes, and the preventive maintenance application group to create those preventive maintenance records. Other than that, most tasks or roles are going to have their own group that they're going to be assigned to. There is one thing to note. There are some application groups that we see in here that are only available to a premium or a base user. And that's the administration module, which includes people, labor, trying to remember what else is in there, crews, crafts, person groups, that sort of thing. Your integration piece, which deals with any integration you have outside of Maximo, the IT infrastructure, and the system configuration, which has the domains, security as well. So all of those applications are only available to base and premium users. Limited users cannot even view what's in there. So only base or premium users can go in and see what's in those groups. All the other groups are fair game. So that's essentially what an application group is. And the next thing you're going to see, we're going to talk about is what are the different types of users that we have. So we had users types as far as like concurrent and authorized, and that's one level. And the second level is what access do they have. So IBM has provided a free user, and this is our self-service users. Those free users, they must have a user login to be able to access anything. They can view service requests they have created. They can't view any service requests from anyone else. So there's no validation there to see if someone else has already created a ticket for my issue. They can view desktop requisitions you've created. So you can create a desktop requisition and submit that to a PR, and then that PR would need to be approved and turned into a PO. But you can create desktop requisitions and submit them. You can, and then you can view, again, only the ones you created for desktop requisitions. So those are the rights that you have. You can go into the mobile application and create a service request in the mobile app. And you can view service requests you created in the mobile app. One thing to keep in mind is because of these abilities, you can see the assets, you can see the hierarchy as you are creating the service request, but you're not going to be able to go to the application and look at it. And the same thing with inventory. So you can see the inventory that was created, and you can, sorry, my dog is trying to chew a wire over here. You can create a record and select an item when you're doing your purchasing through the desktop requisition, but you're not going to be able to go to inventory and look for specific information. It's just going to be what you can see on the lookup there. So they do not have rights to go in and edit or look at other applications. They do not have edit or read access to any add-ons. So scheduler, they would not have any access at all. They wouldn't be able to have any access to, if you had oil and gas or any of those, they wouldn't be able to use any of those. And they do not have any access to work orders, read or edit, start centers, or any other applications in Maximo. So just service requests and desktop requisitions. But these users are free. They're good licenses for like a technician, or I'm sorry, not technician, an operator, where all they're going to do is say, hey, something's going wrong and someone needs to look at it. This is a perfect license for that. The next group that we're going to see in here is a limited user. So a limited user is the bulk of the users that we have in Maximo. Again, you must have a user login for any of these. They do have the ability to read any application except for those ones we identified as administrative applications. So I can go in and look at any of the applications. However, I can only edit up to 3 groups. So we talked about the application groups. So for a technician, this could be work orders and planning and preventive maintenance. Let's say if we wanted them to be able to edit and manage those preventive maintenance records, or it could be purchasing for purchase requisitions and inventory and work orders if you're looking at someone who's doing the inventory application. So you have 3 groups. Those groups can be unique to the individual. So I could have one limited user license that I share concurrent, and user A could have inventory and purchasing and work orders, and B could have preventive maintenance and work orders and planning, and C could have some assets and locations and work orders. So they don't all have to share the same 3 application groups, but they can only have a maximum of 3 application groups for that user. These users can edit their own start center. So they do see the start centers. They can change their start center however they want. They can't change anyone else's start center. They can't change template start centers. They can approve records outside of their 3 apps. So if I give someone access to edit records in planning and preventive maintenance and work orders, I can also give them the ability to approve a purchase order, but they wouldn't be able to edit anything on a purchase order. They would only be able to read that and approve it, and that's it. So approval access is a little bit outside of the 3 applications, but any edit ability in those 3 application groups is considered one of the groups. You can also access scheduler. Scheduler comes included now with Maximo Application Suite with the MAS, and it is its own application group, as we saw on the previous screen. So it would be considered one of the 3 groups that you're given permission to view. As far as mobile, you can create and view records in mobile. Again, what you're using in mobile has to align with your 3 selected groups. So if you have work orders, PM, and planning in Maximo Manage, when you go into mobile, you're not going to be able to do inventory cycle counts, because the inventory cycle counts would require you to have access to inventory, which pushes you over your 3 groups. So if you are, excuse me, expecting someone to do cycle counts, you're going to have to include that application for inventory as part of their 3 groups and give the permissions accordingly. The next one is for add-ons. So we are starting to see more use of the oil and gas add-on because we're introducing Lotto into the Maximo application that we're providing for our plants. And we're starting to basically offer it as an additional, like we do for the project management application. If you're using those add-ons, you can still have read access to all of those applications with the add-on. Again, edit access is a unique group and it's limited to the 3 apps. So if you have an add-on and it adds a new group and you're using something inside that group, that's one of your 3 groups that's included. And it will give you access to monitor. You can use the preventive maintenance. You can use the health and any add-ons and industry solutions as part of your 3 apps. So that is a limited user. The majority of our users are limited users, either concurrent for technicians typically, or they can be a named or authorized limited user for like your ops manager, inventory specialist, purchasing specialist. Those kinds of people would be able to get away with a limited user license. Plant manager as well. Often will have a limited user. The next one we're going to talk about is what we call a base user. This used to be an authorized user, if you remember in the past. IBM still authorized for something else, so we call them base users now. A base user has access to as many applications as they want. There's no limit to which applications they can group. They can have in their group. So they can have the security, they can have all of the integration if they want it, users to a certain extent, but they cannot manage or add new users through the base user application. It requires a different license. They have full rights to mobile, so you can create and view records in mobile and edit mobile. You have ability to use the scheduler application as part of a base user. However, if you have an add-on that is included, so let's say you're using the lockout tagout program, then you are using the oil and gas add-on, and at that point, you cannot have a base user. A base user automatically gets shifted to a premium user. So if you have, monitor, health, predict, scheduler, all this other stuff, but you don't have an add-on, you would be considered a base user. As soon as you add on oil and gas or some other add-on, then you switch automatically to a premium user. You can still have your limited, but you will be only premium users and no base users. So when we talk about adding on like lockout tagout, it will shift your license profile to the new premium user instead of a base user. So we'll talk a little bit about the next one, which is a premium user. Again, all applications, all add-ons, you can access as many applications groups as required. You can edit your own start center, other people's start centers. User management is not allowed with a premium user. That requires a different license, but you have full access to mobile, any add-ons that you want. There are a couple other add-ons we'll talk about that you can add as well, but that's what a premium user is. And again, if you're using the lockout tagout, you'd be considered a premium user. So there's another piece that's required. These are your manage licenses. So these are the licenses that you need to be able to do things and manage. With a new suite application, there are some things you can only do as a suite administrator. When you're using NACE Maximo services, we provide all of those provisions as a suite user internally. So Carlos has permissions to go in there and do all the premium stuff that he needs to. All of us have a base access. We can do what we need to with the base access, and those licenses are covered by NACE. So we don't charge you for suite users. However, if you have your own instance of Maximo and you're doing that on your own, then you would need to provide licensing for a suite premium user at minimum. The suite base user allows you to edit user profiles and permissions and add users. So this attaches or connects through your single sign-on module so that we can now provide Maximo as a single sign-on solution. The suite premium user, you have to have at least one. This allows you to manage your timeouts, your configurations, your integrations. Some of you will notice when you log into NACE Maximo, we have a specific image that you'll see with a link to mobile. We have different banner options and colors. So if you're in production, it's black. If you're in test, it's red. All of those configurations require a premium user. So we do have one with NACE Maximo. And then upgrades and add-ons can be installed by the premium user as well. The premium suite access is added to your manage access. So if, for example, for Carlos, we have a manage premium license for him plus the suite premium license. So we add those totals together, and that's how many tokens he takes out every time he logs in. So we do not provide suite user access unless you request it with NACE Maximo. If you do request it, we can talk about what the cost is for that and what kind of access you need and bill you guys accordingly for that. But currently we don't provide that because it also requires a single sign-on connection for that. So if you have your own Maximo, you could have access to that, but you'll just need to take into consideration the licensing costs for that. So we talked briefly about this. What are application points? If you're using NACE Maximo, we've simplified license by not even paying attention to application points at all. That being said, there is an important part of understanding what kind of access each group has, and so what it costs basically to keep them running. So the way that IBM has changed their licensing is we purchase a pool of points. These points can be used, so users can grab those points to log into Maximo. So based on their license type and their user type, they would grab a specific number of points and use those whenever they go into Maximo. And as long as those points are available in the pool, you can log in. And as soon as those points are gone, then nobody can log in anymore. We talked a little bit about add-ons. So there are some add-ons to Maximo that you would be able to put on, but there would be a licensing cost for that. So civil infrastructure is one application. There's 50 points that would be required constantly for that, just for the installation. They have an inventory optimization tool, which is 220 points, which is massive amount of points. Spatial, visual inspection, collaboration or assist, which allows you to use the mobile application and reach out to an engineer who would be on Maximo and could talk to you visually, share your camera, help you out with things you need. That is free. It's included as part of mobile. If you want us to add assist, you would just need to make sure you have the resources on the back end and the licenses for that individual to log in. And then connectors like SAP, Oracle, Workday connectors are also a specific number of points to consume. So I added this on. 99% of you guys aren't going to use this, but at some point in the future, you may be interested. It is an option. There are some licensing aspects involved with that you might be interested in. But for the licenses that we currently have, A self-service license is only available as a named or authorized user, and there's 0 points for that. So you can drag those out at any time. They can log in. You're never going to get blocked as a self-service user. A limited, if we have a named account, it takes 2 points. If it's concurrent, it takes 5. So when we bill for a limited license, we charge more for a concurrent license than we do for an authorized or named license because of that point consumption. So you'll see that difference in the cost. Base, the same thing. It's 3 if you're named, 10 points if you're concurrent. Premium 5, 15. So you see roughly it's like a 3 times the amount for a concurrent as an authorized. So we usually recommend 4 minimum users per concurrent license instead of buying a named one. So if you have like 3 people that you know are going to need to log in all the time, you can make those named and save a little bit of money in the long run than making those concurrent and having to get more concurrent license so your 3 people can log in. So we'll shuffle a little bit with whether or not they're concurrent or an authorized user just to kind of reduce your costs. And we can do this at any time during your contract to kind of make sure you're in compliance and at the cheapest level that you can be with your licensing. A base license is 5 points, so the same as a premium. So for example, Carlos, who does manage and suite, he would be 5 for his premium plus 10 for his suite premium. So as total number of points he would take out whenever he logs in is 15. So essentially the same as a concurrent license, or where someone else that only does base would be 10, let's say, or 8 if they're not using an add-on. So that's kind of an idea of how those app points work and where those costs come from for you for those different licenses. And IBM gives us a new cost every year for the licenses. I usually don't get those until October. But then I'll figure out what that cost is and can give you an estimate for the next year if you guys are interested. A lot of you guys are kind of going through this license transition at this point, where you're going from what we have to what's going. And I put these as original licenses. These are the new licenses, not original. So if we started as a self-service user, when we transition, you're going to be a self-service user. There's no difference at all. We used to have an express user. That's been eliminated. So now you can only be a limited user. So if you were express in the past, you are now a limited, which is a little bit pricier than an express, but you can be a limited concurrent and sometimes save a little bit of money that way. The benefit to that is you're no longer going to be limited to just one application work orders. You now have up to 3 application groups as a limited license. So if you had a bunch of express users and you switch to limited, you can take a look at your licensing and maybe give people more permissions than they had before to kind of allow you to do more with the users that you have at this point. Because you're paying for a limited anyway, you might as well take advantage of it. If you were limited before, you're still limited. Nothing's changed for you. An authorized user before is now going to be base or premium, depending on whether or not you have the lotto or the oil and gas. So if you were authorized before, you don't have oil and gas, you're going to be base. And if you were authorized and have that, you're going to be a premium. And previous to this, if you had an add-on like oil and gas, you were paying an additional licensing cost for that. That additional licensing cost is gone. If you are only viewing or editing, or that add-on is part of your 3 groups, you're a limited user or premium. If that add-on is, if you're used to be an authorized user, you'll now be premium. So that's how that kind of translates from what you had before to what you have now. On the right here, it should say new licenses, not original licenses. I apologize for that. So I kind of broke this down just so you could see how that works. So if you were self-service, now you're self-service with no add-ons. This is what you were before. This is what you're going to be now. And with the add-ons, what you were before and what you're going to be now. So if you're trying to do a like for like, you kind of have this in your back pocket on how that works. But I'm not going to go over it extensively unless you guys are interested. So now that we kind of killed a dead horse here with the licenses, I'm going to go over a little bit on how we review the license usage. So IBM has a new application here under the suite, and it's in the security section of the suite. Most of you guys don't have access to this. If you ask your NACE providers, we can give you a snapshot of what this looks like, or you can request an idea of what it looks like. But for those of you who are on the NACE environment, we have for 90%, I'm still finishing up the last little pieces, but most of you guys, we have gone through and populated for you a type. This type is common across all of ours, and you can see what type of user you are here. So if you go to security and users and you look over here on the right, you're going to see this type, MLC MPN. If you're not part of the NACE suite, when you go into the user's application, it's going to tell you for each user what their access type is and their entitlement here. So the access type is something that we set. We set whether they're concurrent or they're authorized. And then the points that are consumed will be based off of that. So the suite will never determine that for you. It's going to be something you have to manually manage yourself. However, the entitlement piece on the right, you will never manage the entitlement piece. The Maximo Application Suite is going to calculate that for you. So it's going to say this person is a self-service because they only have access to self-service applications. It's not something I go in and set or you would go in and set. It's something that the system tells you and then charges accordingly. So if that system tells you that you're a limited or a premium and you don't think you are, then you need to change your security access and to be able to change this entitlement. This isn't something that we can like say, no, I only want to be charged a limited for this and change that entitlement. It requires some access changes. For those of you who cannot see this application, this is what the abbreviations are. So we have NACE. These are NACE licenses that are provided at no charge to you. This is going to be your Max admin. All of my NACE Maximo team is going to be added to your environment at no charge to you so that we can log in and do what we need to do. There's going to be a Datadog user that will go in. So anything that we put in, it's no charge to you. It's identified as NACE. So just so you understand what those are for, they can't be deleted or removed necessarily, but they're no charge. An MSS is mass self-service, which is free. MLN, mass limited authorized or named. MLC, mass limited concurrent. So we tried to make these as easy to understand as possible, but you can go through and get a brief look of exactly where people are, how their usage is qualified, and then make sure that that matches with what you think you should be. If you are on the NACE Maximo suite or SaaS, we are currently reviewing all of these and updating these accordingly to where they need to be. So once we get that finished, which should be the end of next month, we're going to start auditing these monthly so we can start catching those changes before they're a problem. In the past, what had happened is we would set your licenses in January and then we would audit them again the next January, and a whole bunch of things had changed. And in the meantime, you know, NACE is holding the bill for the differences, and then now we got to figure out why there are differences and get them all fixed. So by doing a monthly audit, we should be able to catch that before it becomes a problem. And how we do that is we compare what your license type should be here in your user record, which would be this, against what the mass suite believes you should be, this entitlement here. And if those two are different, then we would go in and we would talk to you guys about why they're different, what we need to do to fix those and get those fixed before the next renewal date. The last thing for you guys to understand is how we review license usage and how IBM now does these licenses. So in the past, what would happen is you would get an audit from IBM. They would send auditors in, they would go in and review your license usage, and then they would give you a bill and they would say, this is what you're paying us for versus this is what you're using. And now you owe us $1 million or whatever it is for the difference between the two. It was kind of a nightmare. It was hit or miss whether you would get audited. We were thankfully never audited. It could have happened at any time though. But it basically IBM would do that at great expense. They would provide that auditor and do those licenses. They have changed now to this app consumption. So we have to log into a license pool from IBM, put in our information, get the pool of licenses that we have, and then apply that to our deployment. And what happens is whenever someone logs in, it goes back to that pool of licenses and takes them out and puts them back in. And the usage gets monitored by IBM. So when the licenses are expired or consumed and we don't have them, IBM will come back and say, you need to buy more licenses, and we have to purchase more licenses or more app points for that deployment. So you can see here, it tells us how many we have, tells us how many we've used, the max used during this reporting period, and then what the usage is for each period reserved. So this reserved is people who are authorized. And then the blue is your concurrent user pool. And you can see how many were logged in and usage. And some days it's going to be more than others. It looks like on the weekends, we don't have a lot of concurrent people using it. And the reserved pool never changes unless we add a new reserved user. So this is how we manage our license. This is the report that we get. We're working on getting some better reports from IBM, but this is essentially what we use to determine how many licenses are available, how many you're using, and how that works for you as far as concurrent usage and whether or not you're keeping up with the licenses that you have. So I know that's a lot of information to take in. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or give you guys a demonstration if you have any questions about any of this stuff that we talked about. Are there any questions?
Megan, my head is swimming too much to have any questions.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. So what you should know is we are currently going through this audit. You will get questions if your licenses don't match up. We're going to do our best to try and get those fixed as quickly as we can. And where possible, if we charge you for more, we're going to try and do a credit back for those if we can. But again, we're just doing as much as we can do it. So unfortunately, because of the move, some of you guys will see some changes to your licensing we'll have to go over. But for the most part, we've done everything we can to keep the cost very similar to what you were paying before. So if you came in with licenses before mass, we're trying to keep those costs same after mass, but new users are consuming licenses that cost us more to purchase. And so if you are adding licenses at this point, it's going to be a different cost than what you're currently paying for your licensing. So just be aware of that change as well. Anyone else have any questions?
Hey, so Megan, this is Jim. I guess I'm
Yeah.
still a little confused on
Sure.
how, if we, establish at our sites, all the various different types of users, either it's a base user, an authorized user, or another type and stuff, and those are a certain number of points. How can they use the system more and end up actually incurring more points, I guess, or using more points when they're already limited in what they can do by how they were, signed up in the beginning.
So what ends up happening is we set you up originally with a specific security structure.
Yeah, right.
And what'll happen is as you're working, you're like, hey, I'd like this person to be able to do a job plan now, or I'd like them to be able to work in inventory. And so we change security. And when that security gets changed, sometimes unintentionally, we apply those changes to more people than just the one person we wanted, or the one person that we wanted switches. They used to have 3 application groups. Now they have 4. So that turns them into a base user. So if we don't keep track of those changes and keep track of where people are moving to and what licenses are being given or what additional rights are being given, then what'll happen is we make one change. We think we're only affecting one user and increasing one user's license. But what ends up happening is it affects 20 users. And now we've gone from having one limited concurrent user to one authorized or one base concurrent user. And so that's going to be a huge cost difference. So that's where we're finding the majority of the differences right now between what we had before and what we have now. But that's essentially what we see as far as changes. Or the other thing we see a lot of is, hey, we have a new plant manager. So we set up the new plant manager, but we never take out the old one. So the old one's still consuming a license. Now we have the new one consuming a license. We've just doubled our cost for that user because we didn't deactivate the person who left. So those are the two big differences that we see. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so, but it sounds like to me, it's a little bit more on you and your group to be really careful when you change the security and understanding what that ripple effect is, or like you said, removing the old plant manager. Know to do that so that we don't have that doubling up.
But we don't know the old plant manager left. We get told, hey, we got a new employee, add this new employee. I have no idea that the old plant manager left. No one's told me that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's where we have issues.
Yeah, maybe that's something we need to be really cognizant of as we make requests for different access so that you guys know what to do with that from a licensing standpoint. And probably really important for everybody on your team to let the person making that request, probably the admin or somebody else at the site, to say, hey, this will have, financial consequences. Adding this person will cost more money.
And we do as best as we can let people know that. And the hard part was when we were doing these audits every year, right? It used to take us a good 30 hours to do a license audit, which is not feasible to do that every month. With the way that it's working now, we can do that more frequently. So that's what we're trying to accommodate. But again, it's on both sides. We try to let you know as much as possible. Hey, if you're adding this, it's going to cost you more, or do you have someone you can swap it with? But, there's always a little bit of disengagement between the two here and there. And so just being aware, keeping an eye on what you're using, understanding kind of what your allotment is, and especially when you're requesting new users, taking a look at those users and saying, hey, why is this person active when they shouldn't be, and going in and cleaning those up. It's a big part on both sides to kind of maintain that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense and stuff. How often do you actually, when you make a security change like that, how quickly does that show up in the billing?
It will start showing up right away. So we've switched all of our billing to monthly, and that would start showing up.
So an adjustment that's made mid-month, you will see the next month.
Yes.
Got it.
Unless you make an adjustment. So as much as possible, I will say there are some cases where you make the adjustment on like the 20th and the invoicing cutoff has already been met for counting, and that's not going to show up until the next bill.
Sure. I understood.
So there will be some of those, but yeah, we would start billing that the following month.
Okay, thanks.
And the same thing, if you removed a user, you would see that the following month as well. Any other questions? All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys all coming. I know this is a lot to take in. I appreciate your time. We're going to make this available on YouTube. So if you want to go back and review, you can. And we can also make this PowerPoint available to anyone who has questions or wants to see it again. So you have it in your stock, and we'll probably send it out if we do any licensing changes as well, just so you have that in your back pocket. So I appreciate you all joining. Thank you for coming. And we'll be doing next month on the project management application that's available in Maximo and how to utilize that properly. So Jalen will be doing the presentation next month. We'll be sending out an invite probably tomorrow. So keep an eye on that in your inbox, and we will be talking to you all soon.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.